Very at Chungwa. One of the questions I love to ask my guests is, have you ever been to Simoson? I'll start with you, Wezi. Have you ever been to Simoson?
This is my very first time coming here.
Really?
Yeah.
How is that? How is that? You know how long this building has been here? 37 years, Wezi.
Yeah.
And you've never been to Simoson?
I haven't been alive for that long. So the few years, majority of my life has been spent in Dola.
Right.
How old were you then?
When
37 years ago.
I don't know, maybe 2, 3. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, welcome. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. And what about you, sir? Mr. Isaac. How do you say your last name?
My papa.
Moy Popo.
So I've been here a couple of times.
Okay, a little closer here. Yeah.
I've been here a
About here.
couple of times. I think downstairs there's a shop. There's a gentleman that sells spare parts for vehicles. He's a close friend to my older brother. So time and again would come and check on him.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Save Zambia from Tobacco, an interactive online show dedicated to raising awareness about the dangers of tobacco consumption and advocating for a healthier Zambia. I'm your host, Simon Mwewa, and I am thrilled to have with me Wezi and Mr. Isaac, who's the executive director of
The Center for Trade Policy and Development, CTPD.
Right. Of course, everybody knows Wezi.
Yeah.
One of the first things I said to her, I said, I know you. And she looked at me, she says, you know me, we've never met before. I said, well, on social media, you feel like you know people.
Yes.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Now, let me begin by saying that did you know that in 2024, 2024 marks 16 years since Zambia became party to the World Health Organization's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. The FCTC requires that countries party to this convention domesticate its provisions and enact comprehensive tobacco control laws. In the absence of this law, Zambia continues to lose over 7,000 lives annually due to tobacco related illnesses, with youths and adolescents being the most at risk. With the emergence of novel tobacco and nicotine products such as shisha and vapes on the Zambian market, that number is expected to rise by 2025, according to World Health Organization studies. Against this backdrop, we bring you this online interactive show to dig deeper into this conversation. I'm going to start with you, uh, Dr. Not Dr. Isaac, Mr. Isaac, my
Papa.
my purple. Yes. How much of a problem is tobacco consumption in Zambia, and how has it impacted the economy?
So, tobacco consumption is increasingly becoming a big problem in our country. In terms of statistics from the World Health Organization, there are actually estimates that we have close to 11% active consumers of tobacco. And part of the big concern from institutions like the Center for Trade Policy and Development are the implications that tobacco comes with. And some of these implications are speaking to the health implications and the burden in terms of dealing with some of those tobacco related illnesses. If you look at the current challenges that the country is facing with regards to the performance of the economy, you realize that we are in a situation where it would be very difficult for us to mobilize resources domestically to finance our health sector. And if we're burdened with diseases that are related to tobacco plus many others, then it really becomes a challenge for us to respond to some of those challenges. And if you look at the actual figures, there are actually estimates that we spend close to 2.8 billion kwacha in treating and providing care to diseases that are related to tobacco. That in itself is a significant problem, and it needs attention from policymakers as well as the general public in addressing a challenge such as this one.
Now, as we earlier said, the data suggests that by 2025, this problem of shisha and all these not this novel tobacco is expected to rise quite significantly. Tell us, how can we address this situation?
Well, one of the strategic ways of addressing a challenge such as this is through legislation, ensuring that we have a legal framework that is robust enough to respond to this emerging challenge that we have. So if you look at even the information you had provided at the beginning of this program, Zambia is affiliated to the World Health Convention framework on tobacco control. And from the time that we expressed interest to be part of this, it has taken us over 10 years for us in terms of getting to domesticate that so that it is part of our national laws. We do have a draft bill on tobacco that has continued to move from one ministry to the other. And some of these delays have contributed towards the challenge that we have. On the other side, if you look at the local authorities, they do have provisions in terms of bylaws that are speaking to curtailing or prevention of people smoking in public places like where we are here. But one of the big challenges that we've observed equally through research has been weak implementation of those laws.
Wesley, let me turn to you. Have you had any personal experiences with tobacco that influenced your decision to focus on this issue?
Uh, as an entertainer, I'm around people who've got different interests and they indulge in different things. So I find myself in a situation where I have to avoid smoking passively because through my interaction with the Center for Trade Policy and Development, I have learned that passive smoking is actually very dangerous. And you could, if your friend has got TB, for instance, and it's not very advanced or whatever, maybe they don't know. If they're inhaling and exhaling the cigarettes they're smoking, and I am inhaling whatever is coming out of them, I'm actually getting, I'm in the line of getting TB. And that's just an example for the layman to understand. There's more than just TB. There's cancer, there's different types of diseases. We'll just say tobacco related, diseases. So yes, through my research and also my collaboration with Center for Trade Policy, I have been given reasons to understand the emergency. I would call it an emergency at this particular point, especially because it's people within my age group that are mostly indulging.
Have you faced any reactions from audiences regarding your tobacco control advocacy?
Yes, I have. Um, some people will tell you to encourage you, and then some people will be like, you're just being a goody two shoes. You know what I mean? You don't even believe in the advocacy that you're doing, because I've got friends of mine who think that shisha is safer than normal cigarettes. There are people who think e-cigarettes are much safer than normal cigarettes, and
Which isn't the
which
case.
isn't the case. They're actually more harmful. I spoke to one of the lawmakers. I've forgotten his name. Forgive me. He was explaining to me. He was a medical doctor by profession before he entered parliament, I think. And then he was explaining to me that for those e-cigarettes to be made, there are chemicals. So it's more than just whatever it is that is in tobacco. It's also like the chemicals involving the material building that e-cigarette. So that is giving you even bigger risks than normal cigarettes. Yeah.
Mr. Mwaipopo, what challenges have you faced in calling for enhanced tobacco control regulation? Because the idea most people have in their head is when we talk about regulating tobacco, some people think, no, you're saying that they must ban cigarettes. And if you ban cigarettes, it means the tobacco, people who grow tobacco are not going to make money. What's your view about that?
Well, we have actually had some of those challenges, and a number of people thinking that we are calling for the complete ban on the production of tobacco. And we're here to clarify that it's actually not the case. And our advocacy is basically that as a country, we need to come up with a legislative framework that ensures that we protect some segments of our population from exposure to tobacco. We're equally advocating for other measures such as uh, banning the advertising of tobacco so that ultimately we can make tobacco less accessible so that we do not have young people being exposed to tobacco. We have equally been pushing for increasing of taxes on tobacco through instruments such as the national budget. And it's all in an attempt to ensure that with the damage that comes with consumption of tobacco, there should also be a fair contribution towards the remedy in terms of dealing with the illnesses that come related to tobacco. But we're more equally interested in ensuring that young people are protected from exposure because we've also seen that industries are coming up with innovations that are meant to attract young people. Hence, you see things like shisha, vaping, all with an effort to just ensure that young people get attracted and think like this is something funny, this is something more exciting compared to how people used to smoke previously. So that's really our focus.
Mm. Weze, let me turn back to you. What opportunities do you see for artists to contribute to public health campaigns, particularly those focused on tobacco control?
Thank you. Um, I think that we all have a duty to make this world safer for, if not for our own sake, the sake of our family members, but if you have the privilege to have a platform where people pay attention to what you say, your obligation to speaking about the health of society is even much greater. You've got a responsibility. So it gives me an opportunity also to not just be an entertainer, but to have a positive impact on society using my voice, to be very intentional about the causes. And public health is something that we shouldn't compromise on. So I'm passionate about mental health. I'm passionate about HIV/AIDS awareness. I'm also passionate about the tobacco control because in that there's many issues, many health issues involved, and it's my health group. I would love, I hate to say we are the perpetrators, but we are the ones who are glamorizing this lifestyle. We are the ones who are going to the clubs, ordering shisha. And I know it looks nice, especially on social media when you put it on slow-mo and stuff like that. And I hate to be that person that has to burst the bubbles, but I feel like we have a responsibility as artists to discourage certain behaviors, where you find that in your youth you are doing these things and then you are spending the rest of your years, trying to undo the things that you are doing in your youth. So I think it gives us a very good opportunity to create music and to create stories, to create shows, not just to entertain people, but also to remind people of their obligation towards public health.
Hmm. Back to you, Mr. Isaac. Your advocacy campaign on tobacco control has been misconstrued to a large degree.
Yeah.
You know, the calling for the banning of tobacco products in Zambia. What is your campaign about? I know you've said it, but for re-emphasis, what is the campaign about?
Well, it's very simple. Our campaign is for the government, as in the Zambian government, to ultimately pass the law that would help to protect citizens from the harmful effects of tobacco. And we have been doing this through multiple platforms. We've been engaging on radio platforms, TV programs, as well as engaging young people to just sensitize them on the dangers related to tobacco and how we think effectively the Zambian government can actually get to put the issue or the challenge under control. And one of the things that we have observed is that some of these things are agendas that are actually being pushed by industry players. Industry players would basically mean those that are producing or in the production of tobacco. They try by all means to create narratives that paint a negative picture that should we have legislation in place, it will lead to the banning of production of things like tobacco. But that's actually not the case. The agenda is that let's come up with a regulation like other countries have done to ensure that
Rules.
there are several countries that have actually passed Yes.
Hmm.
So ultimately, when we have that legal framework, it will help to protect citizens, young people, from the harmful effects of tobacco. But equally, the Zambian government will get to benefit from managing diseases that are related to tobacco, and will end up having a healthy population that can contribute significantly to the development process of this nation.
And just to add to that, Mr. Isaac, do you realize that here in the CBD,
Yeah.
all the bus drivers smoke while driving? Well, when I say all, most of them, while driving public transportation vehicles. No one says anything to them.
Exactly.
They fear being scolded or shouted at or
Yep.
being thrown off the bus if you say to a driver you're smoking. These are some of the regulations you're talking about. When you go to a restaurant,
Yes.
oftentimes I'll go to a restaurant and I'll say to the waitress, "Well, why don't you tell them not to smoke?"
Yeah.
No, if we tell them, they won't come back. We're chasing customers.
Exactly. So those are some of the practices we need to be looking at, especially from the local authority. Now that they've established presence in central business development centers, and they're interacting with these people. So beyond just the process of getting to collect, let's say, fees, parking fees, it would also be important that they go a step further by ensuring that those that are smoking in such public places, they get to execute their mandate by ensuring that one, they sensitize them, but for those that are not adhering, measures are taken to ensure that they are brought to a book. Because ultimately, if you've got a bus driver that is smoking, or even a conductor that is smoking, it means that you are forcing 12 to 15 people to passively
Yes,
smoke. And within that same bus, there could be people that already have conditions that can be deeply affected as a result of passively smoking tobacco by force, simply because you've gotten onto that pass. So we have a bigger obligation as a country. There is need for collective responsibility, and it remains our call to strategic institutions like the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Commerce, as well as the Ministry of Finance, because these are the key ministries at the center of this conversation around enacting a bill that would bring in adequate measures on controlling tobacco consumption in this country.
commemorating World No Tobacco Day
Yep.
without the tobacco control bill. What does that mean for Zambia?
Well, it's a lost opportunity. This, especially if you look at the theme for this year, we're basically looking at the interference that industry players have been having. We are also looking at the level of or the number of strategies that industry players have been using to attract young people into smoking, shisha, as well as vaping. And we do think that the Zambian government would have taken advantage of such a significant day in our calendar, because this is a global event, to ultimately send a strong message that we remain resolute as a country. We remain committed to push this agenda all the way to the end until we have effective legislation that creates options, but as well protects various segments of our population from exposure to tobacco.
And lastly, this year's World No Tobacco Day is focused on protecting children from tobacco industry tactics. How are you interpreting this theme, especially that your campaign is youth focused?
So our interpretation is basically trying to raise awareness in terms of helping the public to understand what these tactics are. A practical example we can give in terms of these tactics has been an issue of trying to ensure that the bill does not get to parliament. So you find that you get to finalize the draft bill, it goes to Minister of Justice, consent is provided at cabinet. A few days before it goes to parliament, an issue is raised. Then the procedure changes. You'd have to go and relook at the piece of legislation. And this has been going on for over 10 years. And if you look at that, you ultimately get to see that at the center of this whole thing is the industry players. They've got billions at their disposal, and they don't care in terms of whatever consequence it might be. They'll just ensure that ultimately they push an agenda to frustrate the process, so that ultimately this country does not get to have adequate laws that support the agenda around tobacco control.
Wesley, in light of what he's just said, do you see any? I mean, we've been struggling with this for more than 10 years.
Mm,
It's a back and forth.
mm.
They're kicking the can down the road. do you, where we've reached now, do you see any sort of hope at the end of the, any light at the end of the tunnel in getting this legislation and laws actually passed to protect people?
I don't know if me being an optimist puts me in the right position to answer that question. My answer is yes. For as long as there are people like Isaac and myself, there should always be, you know, the zeal to advocate for the right thing, for the tobacco control bill and for the right policies, and for us all to understand that this is not a starring, it's not a superstar thing. No, Isaac is trying to create reputation around his advocacy work or me. No, it's really got something to do with everybody, including the policymakers themselves. It helps them, their families, and the entire country. And like he said about the framework, um, these other countries, there's countries that have adopted and they've enacted it into their domestic laws. And you can get testament from Malawi and other countries that have adopted it. They can use that as a case study to say we are not advocating for the total banning of tobacco. So for as long as there's a need for us to improve, we should never get weary. We should not grow tired. I mean, anything that is worth having is worth fighting for. And we shouldn't get discouraged because it's taken over a decade. We should continue. That's what I think. There's hope.
Wezi, Mr. Isaac, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, sir.
Cheers. Love.